there, folks. Welcome back to our series of interviews with our wonderful DevReach speakers. Today, I'm here with Selam, who will be giving the talk Ethically Wired, Computer Ethics for Technologists. Who stumbled on that one a little bit. We are so glad to have you here. Do you want to go ahead and give us a quick introduction?
Oh, no problem. Hi, everyone. I'm Selam Moges. As mentioned, I am a technologist. I'm a software engineer. I work at a company called Apella. And I'm really looking forward to having this conversation with you, Catherine. And yeah, let's get started.
Awesome. So maybe start us off by telling us a little bit about your career journey and kind of what got you so interested in this particular aspect of software engineering.
So specifically, are you asking about my job in terms of medical technology or just like ethics?
Oh, sorry, I should have been more clear about your involvement in ethics,
Okay.
specifically ethics for technologists.
Yeah, cool. So I went to NYU, and during my time at NYU, I noticed that most of my studies were really based around how to build something, which granted, as a software engineer, that's really important. Like
Right.
the major coding components are always, of course.
That's part of it too. Yeah.
But I don't think we took some time to focus on why we're actually building the things that we build and how that could actually affect the people and communities that use our products or use the things that we build. And although I didn't necessarily see the consequences of the things that I built in the space or like homework assignments and things like that, you can see it on a wide scale when working for larger tech companies and the consequences of their actions when they choose to build certain things and release it out into the world without those guardrails or thinking about it a little bit more deeply.
Definitely. So is that related to what you currently do at Apella, or kind of tangentially, or what are you working on now, I suppose is maybe the right question.
Well, at Apella, I work on something completely different. I don't necessarily work on ethics directly, but I work at a med tech company, which is another passion of mine. While at NYU, I was pre-med and I studied computer science.
I didn't know that. That's so cool.
Thank you. I was really interested in that medley between software that could help people in healthcare and how we can improve people's lives in healthcare in an equitable way and cheaply through technology. And I have the opportunity to think about these problems more deeply in the context of my work at Apella. And Apella is a software company that creates tools for day-to-day management for hospitals and also just helps track metrics around like efficiency for surgeons. And I think that being in this domain and being in this space offers me the opportunity to think more critically as like an engineer and how we can affect patients and how we can affect hospital staff and things like that.
Right. So it's kind of intrinsically a part of the work that you do now, even if it's not necessarily like a specialization or it's in your title.
Yeah, exactly.
By nature of creating that kind of software, it's something that is crucial, really.
Yeah, of course, especially working with like patients and working with like surgeons and things like that. This just ethics and things around that just really become really important.
Absolutely. So for folks who are completely new to the concept of computer ethics or tech ethics, can you go ahead and define that for us and kind of tell us what it means to be an ethical technologist?
Yeah, so I think computer ethics to me has always just been a branch of ethics with a set of commonly agreed upon principles that kind of just govern the use of computers and how we build them and then ultimately how we use them. And an ethical technologist just means someone who thinks about ethics as they're building and has like these ethical guardrails and moral standards in mind as they're trying to create something, even before the coding step, just thinking about the actual product or end goal. They have these frameworks in mind about why are we building the things that we're building.
Right. So you mentioned a little bit guardrails. So what do you kind of mean by that? What would you consider to be some of the guardrails that need to happen before a feature is shipped or an app is published to make sure that it's kind of ethically sound?
I think that with anything around morals and principles, it really depends on the domain and also just depends on the person. Between you and I, for example, we could have different morals and principles about anything, but I think it's the responsibility of the domain experts to really come to a consensus about what they think is the right or wrong thing to do in the context of the products that they're building. And I think that, in a capitalistic society, it's really sometimes hard to think about right if right is costly. But I think these are the conversations that we should have, because ultimately not everything is about the dollar. And really, especially when it's affecting so many people and so many communities, it really is important to think about how is this going to affect what we're doing and who it's going to affect.
Absolutely. And I would imagine that that trade-off is kind of a short-term, long-term thing, right? In
Exactly.
that being less ethically careful might be more profitable in the short run, but businesses that care
Yeah.
about their users are probably more likely to be successful in the long run, I would
Yeah.
guess.
Yeah, of course. And then also there's just the whole concept of like recalls, for example, won't happen as often if we're just more careful about the things that we build and who it's affecting. And I think ultimately, when building a product, the goal should always be to make it as accessible as possible and as
Yes.
inclusive as possible. And we all have a target audience and target user base when building products, but really expanding that to make sure that anyone can use it is really important.
Definitely. So one of the things offline that you and I talked about once is this concept of a pre-mortem, and I really liked it. So I was hoping you could tell us a little bit more about what that is and how that might fit into a team's ethical process at work.
Yeah. So I guess for people who don't know what a postmortem is, that's kind of where the pre-mortem came from. And just a postmortem is a conversation that people on a team have around how looking back at the products that we built and what went right, what didn't go right, and things like that, and kind of looking to the future for the next product. What can we avoid doing, or what can we do again? So this whole concept of a pre-mortem that we were talking about was really just figuring out, before we release this product in the world, what can go wrong, and
Mm-hmm.
are we okay with what could possibly go wrong? Because even as a engineer, I can only hope that someone uses the products that I build the way that I intended it to, but that's not always guaranteed when we release something out into the world. So during this
Yeah.
pre-mortem conversation would be, okay, how could someone use and unfortunately abuse this product? And what kind of guardrails can we create to prevent that abuse? And outside of that, it's really thinking about, everyone use this product?
Mm-hmm.
And have we tested this enough, or have we tested this concept enough before we even start coding? Have we tested this concept enough um,
Yes.
for where anyone can use this comfortably, it's accessible, and different types of people who want to use it can use it and don't feel excluded?
Mm-hmm. I was laughing a little bit at what you said about kind of putting something out into the world and just hoping, because all of us know if you've ever built a user interface, users will find incredibly creative ways to break that or to get trapped in things that you'd never guessed or to find some bizarre path that you had never guessed. So I
Yeah.
really like the idea of kind of sitting down to try and brainstorm ways in which that might happen. I also like that you brought up user testing, which I think makes all the sense in the world. Um, so you kind of mentioned testing before anything is even built. What could that look like? I think most of us are familiar with testing after we've completed something, we put it in front and do like usability testing. So
Yeah,
what
of
would
course.
this kind of pre-testing look like?
Well, I think pre-testing would look more like conversations, especially with the
Mm,
community and people that could be directly impacted by the products that we're building. So, for example, bringing domain experts, not in the sense of someone who can code the best or someone who necessarily can build the actual product, but domain experts in regards to, these people are going to be directly impacted by the work that I'm trying to build, and having really conversations about their pain points and really understanding what their needs are before actually building the product, and then constantly including them into the design process is a
mhm.
really crucial step before we actually get started into getting to the weeds of things and actually trying to build the product.
That makes sense. So, right, for stuff like you're working on kind of med tech, that might include, right, doctors or nurses or even
Yeah,
patients, right?
exactly. Yeah, exactly, exactly.
Nice. So many of us have either already graduated or maybe we didn't go to college and get that kind of formal computer sciences education. But if we're still interested in becoming more ethical engineers or developers, what is it that we can do to kind of kind of flex that muscle a little bit more and get into that practice?
So I love this question because I think that sometimes people feel a little bit intimidated about learning something new if they didn't have that formal education or degree around it, or at least a couple classes. But I think that the internet has given all of us the luxury to be an expert at something by connecting with other people who are domain experts through readings, through YouTube and TikToks. Like there's so many ways to really get connected and really get engrossed into a topic. And personally, for me, I started reading this book called Design Justice, and I fell in love with this topic shortly after. And it really got me thinking about what am I actually building? What am I actually doing? And caused me to reflect on what I wanted as an engineer. And especially working in various companies, whether it's med tech or big tech or social media, you kind of are faced with questions of like, am I building something that I'm proud of? And am I building something that could possibly harm someone else? And I think that when reading this book, Design Justice, it offered me principles to keep in mind. It gave case studies, examples of what is right and what can go wrong. And I really love the book for that. Outside of that, outside of that, I also read Technically Wrong. I think, Catherine, you also read Technically Wrong and recommended it to me.
Yeah,
So
I read
I read Technically Wrong. And I also really loved it for, again, the case studies that they offered and the interesting questions. I think the one thing about these books that I'm just sharing is that they don't necessarily, they're not ethical books, as in like they don't necessarily say this is all the right things you should do and these are all the wrong things that you shouldn't do. But I think they offer case studies and examples and pose questions that are really interesting. And then these are questions that you can kind of carry into your own domain and ask the people in your teams, in your communities, what do you think about this? Because this directly affects how we build our products. And they give their own personal suggestions of what went right for them. And then you can kind of adopt that. And I really loved that concept and that framework. And then also another one that I really enjoyed was Weapons of Math Destruction is one that I'm currently looking into at the moment. So outside of the
That's a
name
clever
being
title. I really like that.
yeah, outside of the name being really catchy, I really love that book as well.
I really liked what you said kind of about it's all a little bit different, and these books aren't necessarily saying like this is right and this is wrong. I think that's probably one of the things that feels most intimidating to a lot of us, especially those of us that have that engineering or development background, where a lot of times we are looking for a yes or a no, or maybe a little used to that binary kind of situation where there's a right way to code things or a wrong way to code things, and when it's wrong, we get an error, and that it's just a little different when you're dealing with larger ethical questions. Do you think that's just something that folks need to kind of get comfortable with, that kind of uncertainty? Or do you think there's, I don't know, are there steps folks can take to feel a little bit more confident making ethical choices or feeling at home being someone who has to make an ethical decision?
I think these are going to honestly always feel challenging because it isn't binary. In a lot of our work that we do, especially as an engineer, if it's wrong, there's a bug. If it's right, there's an error kind of thing. And so going into ethical questions, it's a little bit murkier in terms of what someone can deem as right or wrong. And there are always going to be drawbacks that sometimes we just have to accept that this is going to be the drawback. But the overall action that we're taking is the right action, or we feel that it is the right action. So I think that exercising this muscle is the best and I think only way to make this make someone feel comfortable. And like most things in the beginning, it might feel uncomfortable, but ultimately I think that this is the right thing to do in terms of having these conversations, discussing if this is the ethically sound and moral, and again considering what could go wrong. And not to say that we don't, as engineers or as technologists, not to say that we don't think about what's the worst case scenario, but I think that doubling down on what the worst case scenario is from an ethical standpoint, I think would be beneficial.
No, I agree. I think a lot of times when we're thinking about a worst case scenario, we're often thinking about a technical worst case scenario or
Yeah.
a worst case scenario for the company. It's not
Yeah.
always a worst case scenario for the user, which is more of what you're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And then I also think that if we're not talking about the target user, those other users on the sidelines who are also affected might not get the same type of limelight. So just also
Yeah.
considering the different types of people outside of like the target user base is really important.
I read such an interesting article recently that was kind of arguing to remove this idea of the like quote unquote normal user from
Yeah.
our vocabulary as developers, or the idea of the quote unquote edge case, because that's
Yeah.
just as much as we might want it to work that way because it's more convenient for us, it's just not the way that it works in reality.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that we end up building more robust technology when we really take out these
Yes.
terms. And it also, when we define someone as like a target user or an edge case, it kind of makes it feel like one type of person is less than or greater than another type of person. When regardless, if we're both using the app, it should work for both of us, or using the software, we should just both work. It should work for both of us.
Yes.
So, I think that it's something that really should just be removed, and we should just be talking about how can we just make this great for everyone.
Agreed. All right, so I'm going to wrap us up on a slightly lighter note. We got into it a little bit tonight, but so what are you most looking forward to about DevReach or visiting Sofia, Bulgaria?
Honestly, I'm really excited about meeting the people who are going to come, and also obviously, Catherine, seeing you. I I feel like this pen pal, like we were talking about this earlier, just having this like pen pal relationship is going to be like surreal to see you in person, meeting all the people after the talks, and also just engaging with the other types of speakers or the different types of speakers and listening to what they have to share too. I think it's also just a really interesting place. Outside of this conference, I don't necessarily know if I would have found myself in Bulgaria. So I'm really excited to see Sofia, really excited to see the people, and yeah, just spend a week long there talking about something I care about.
Yes, we have got some really cool speakers lined up for folks who have not maybe seen the rest of the speaker interviews. Definitely hop over to our YouTube and check those out. We have them all posted there. And it is really going to be just a group of brilliant folks. So I agree. I'm very excited. This is going to be a speaker dinner that I'm really looking forward to.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for your time today, Salam. And for the rest of you, I really hope to see you in Sofia for DevReach this October. See you guys later.
Yeah. Bye.